That's an experience I had a lot being at the new school. Like, I'm in this classroom, but I'm also a part of the world doing this work. You know, I think one of the things that I really appreciated about being at Lang was the space that I was given to have a certain level of freedom. Like, I really created the structure of what I wanted my education to look like. Right now, I'm working on doing a lot of performance art that really steeped in breaking down archetypes, specifically women of color, and specifically the way they're depicted in the media.
It actually started before Lang with a high school teacher giving me a copy of Robert Heilbronner's book, just one of the many great writers who taught at the New School, and I wanted to study under people who wanted to look at things in a different way. I work for the Central Labor Council of the AFL-CIO here in New York. What I do is help to craft policies that will lift our economy from the bottom up and middle out and create a sustainable economy that works for everybody and not just the top 1%.
25 years later and 4 degrees later, I can safely say that Eugene Lang was the greatest intellectual experience of my life.
You know, in our political discourse today, we're not so much talking to each other, but at each other. And I think that Lang gave me the ability and the skill sets, quite frankly, to sit down and to hear somebody else's position and to really rectify their position and my own and find a common ground that we can move forward on.
Hi, I'm Brittany Charlton, Eugene Lang College class of 2007. I'm coming to you from Harvard Medical School, where I'm now a postdoctoral fellow in epidemiology. Faculty like Laura Liu and Ann Snittel mentored me through projects while I was at Lang documenting transgender hate crimes, which laid the groundwork for my current research.
Kind of place where you're really given the opportunity to grow as an individual and grow as an artist and grow as a thinker, and I really value and appreciate that, and I carry that with me now.
I would hope that the future of Lang is a place that embraces its activist roots, that is able to take the energy of a lot of the students who want to be change agents and finds an outlet for them to create that change.
I think that I can continue to be a part of the growth of the New School by continuing to do the work that I do, continuing to be really critical, continuing to have those tough conversations.
I think the future of the New School is an institution where the students and the faculty and people who want to change the world and change their communities and change their workplace can come and can discuss big ideas, and that I hope this can be a bastion of free thought as it has been and will be in the future. The real benefit of the Lang education is being able to ask yourself on a regular basis, why do you think that?
Good morning. Whoa, is that too loud? Just about right. And welcome to Eugene Lang College and to the New School. My name is Stephanie Brown. I'm the Dean of the college. We start with that video because it's about students. An institution is nothing more than the human beings who gather together to do a project that is bigger than anything. The faculty here, the students who are already here, together we make up this community. And it's about the project we are embarked upon with you, for you. Just place. So because we start with the students, the first thing we should do is turn to someone beside you or behind you and introduce yourself. Now I'm going to try to get your attention to that. I think we've admitted a real class of Lang students, ready to talk and engage with one another. You will learn with one another, opening your minds, your intellect, your creativity to views that you don't currently hold, to ones you may never want to hold. You may find you're changing what you think. But you may also be feeling right now, because it's a real threshold moment. Sometimes we don't know we've crossed a threshold. We look back and go, whoa, that was a fork in the road. But sometimes they're very obvious, and they're really kind of decked out and dressed up, and you know, aha, this is a threshold moment. Obviously, starting college is such a moment. So maybe you're feeling a little fear, anxiety, maybe confidence, curiosity, eagerness, some combination of all those. The funny thing is that's what I'm feeling too, and all of us, because there's starting the academic year, welcoming the new members of our community is both exciting and thrilling and a little nerve-wracking. And the best thing that we can do is to do what this community is all about, and that is to learn, to listen, to speak, to listen again, and to commit yourself to the ideas, the action, the experiences that allow us to learn. You're going to get some great words of wisdom, some framing today from colleagues, students, staff. There are a lot of people here who are committed to you and your learning and your growth. That includes me. My door is open to every one of you. I teach, I advise, I remain a part of the community, the learning community. And I want to end these few comments with what I do when I need to sort of handle all those exciting emotions of the beginning of the academic year. I memorize poetry. And a couple years ago, in thinking about welcoming students, I decided to do a mashup of poems about New York City, because many people come here initially because they want to study in New York City. So these are 4 little snippets. The first one is by Walt Whitman, and he's musing on the name of Manhattan. The second one is by Langston Hughes, and he's thinking about the journeys people have taken to come to New York. The third is by Galway Kinnell. He's thinking about the East River and lives as they're starting and maybe lives as they're a little more mature. And finally, it ends with Nikki Giovanni and a little snippet of her Just a New York poem. And it's really about the possibility of reigniting an old love affair. I was asking for something specific and perfect for my city, whereupon lo upsprang the Aboriginal name, a word liquid, sane, unruly, magical, self-sufficient, for an island 16 miles long. Good morning, Daddy. I was born here, he said, watched Harlem grow, out of Penn Station, dark 10th of a nation, planes from Puerto Rico and holds of boats, Chico, up from Cuba, Haiti, Jamaica, and buses marked New York, from Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, to Harlem, Brooklyn, the Bronx. On the shore, past the Navy Yard, under the Williamsburg Bridge, the Jamaica local crawls and white-winged gulls flap. A boy sits on the pier, swinging his legs. His days go by. A man stands on the pier. He has long since stopped wishing his heart were full. Oh, river of tomorrow flowing, we stand on the shore. And maybe some evening, when the taxis have passed you by and that light sort of rain that occasionally falls in New York begins, you'll take a thought and laugh aloud. And the notes carrying all the way over to me We'll run again together toward each other. Yes? Welcome to Lang.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Natalia Mehlman-Petrzela. I'm the chair of the first year program here at the seminars that you'll all take, and an associate professor of history. And I first want to welcome you, and even though I didn't plan to say this, what I have to share is that, even though I've been a faculty member here for 9 years, and it's been a few more years than that since I was a college first year myself, I too arrived in New York City as a first year. I was 17, and I just want to share with you the feeling that I had, because I think some of you might recognize yourself a bit in this feeling. And I'll tell you. So I come from Boston, outside of Boston, to the suburbs, very much not the city. And I wanted more than anything to go to New York City for college. It didn't even really matter which college I went to. So I drive into New York City, and like you are all going through, there's a lot of orientation weeks, the orientation activities, and then it came the time for my parents to drive away. And even though this is all I wanted, since the moment I thought about being a college student, I felt this simultaneous rising excitement and rising dread as well. Why didn't I pick a campus school? Why did I choose the biggest city in the world to take on? Why am I here? And then from that moment, I had this sense, and it's so cliched, but really, well, if I can make it here, I can make it anywhere. So I share that with you. It's a little embarrassing how cliched it is to have felt that, but because that mix of emotions, I think, is totally normal and understandable for anyone starting college, but like everything in New York, it's super intensified. So I hope that you're feeling more excitement than dread, and we're all here to help you navigate that as you make your way. So I want to tell you a little bit about the first year seminars and why I find them so exciting. Not logistics. Your brains are probably exploding with logistics, but really the big so what of why it's potentially such an important part of your experience and why I continue to get excited to lead this program. Like Lang is through and through in the new school, and what you just saw in this video and what you hopefully are already experiencing, these seminars that you're going to take, they're led by people who are experts in their fields and their disciplines, but they're experiences and courses that are deliberately unbounded by disciplinary distinctions. So if you take a class from an economist, you're not learning Intro to Econ 101. If you take a class from a historian, it's not a survey of dates since 1865. What we're doing in these classes is confronting questions that I think are exciting because of their bigness. Why is this world an unequal place? Why does health continue to be a marker of inequality in this country? Where did national borders even come from, and why do we continue to police them with the energy that we do? Why are we even here? I mean, these are the kind of questions that no matter what discipline your professor is from, that you are going to be taking on. And to me, that is kind of fundamental to the work that you stand to do here as a student at this institution in the world. But I also find these seminars and much of what you'll experience here at Lang exciting not just for the bigness of the questions that you'll take on, but exciting for the smallness of the questions you'll take on. And I don't mean smallness in terms of irrelevance or the fact that they're just minutia or trivial, unimportant facts, but rather that the mundane things that you encounter in your everyday life, I hope that you'll come to see through new eyes and ask new questions about things that you once maybe took totally for granted. For example, if you went to public high school in this country, there's a very good chance that your high school, over half a century since Brown v. Board of Education was passed, the decision that desegregated schools, there's a very good chance that your school was either primarily minority students or primarily white students. When you're a kid, that's just a social fact of your existence. You almost don't think to question it. Here, even though you're all out of high school, congratulations, hopefully you learn to have new eyes to look back on what was just the fact of how you sat in high school. As how you sat in school for 12 years, as you walk through the city, celebrated and loves to celebrate itself, in some ways rightfully, as being one of the most diverse cities in the world, you'll still realize how incredibly segregated it is along lines of class and race as you take, I hope, the chance to walk through neighborhoods and see how they shift from block to block. less, transcendent things than racial inequality. You might look at your emails and realize that a lot of people here have signatures where they sign and indicate what pronouns they use. When did that happen? How did that happen? Is that something that you experience where you're from? These are all kind of mundane experiences of everyday life that I hope that you'll have new eyes to encounter and to question. And here's the other thing. This seminar program, we've done a lot of work to engineer it for what we think is relevant and important and, useful for you as first-year students. But the thing that I think makes them, I hope, successful and I think most interesting is that work of asking big questions and constantly re-examining the small things around us that we take for granted, it's actually intrinsic to the work that I know I do as a scholar and a human and a citizen, and which I think a lot of my colleagues would describe their work as well. So I just want to conclude by telling you a few things about the work that I do as a scholar. So the project that I'm working on right now I was visiting Southern California, and I was going for a walk after a long day at a conference, and I looked up, and as Southern California there are a lot of sprawling buildings, and there was a two-story, on the top 2 stories of a building, there was a very big gym. And it was like 7:30 at night, and there were rows and rows and rows of machines of people going nowhere, in place, just sweating, working out, eyes straight ahead, looking at nothing, not talking to each other, paying a lot of money to be there, not being at home with their families or walking outside, but all in this collective activity of paying to sweat, to go nowhere by themselves. And I thought, and I was, working on a totally different project about education back then, and I'm like, that's really weird. That is like a very bizarre thing. And actually, you probably have seen that even in these neighborhoods. That same dynamic, that same kind of impetus is repeated all over this country. And so I started to ask questions. Where did that come from? How did so many Americans come to think that spending time and money and energy running in place to go nowhere was a good use of their time? And so that really is one of the questions which animates this project, which I'm looking at now, which is, how did we become what I call a fit nation in quotation marks, because being obsessed with exercise is a national fixation right now. But guess what? Only 20% of Americans actually exercise the recommended amount. And 80% of Americans live in what's called a fitness desert, more than half a mile from any kind of access to a fitness or recreational facility. So I started asking those questions, and through that process, it turns out that there's a whole book to be written, and it's about changing ideas about body image, about health, about beauty, about community, about affluence, and all of that came from just taking a moment to pause and to look at all those people on treadmills and to ask, wait a minute, what are we even doing here, and why is this like this? And so I say that to you because I think your world is about to change dramatically. The things that you have taken for granted as just fixtures of the world you live in are ones that I hope here at Lang you'll take the opportunity to scrutinize and to interrogate from new perspectives, benefiting from your own new insights and also from those of the students and faculty around you who you'll encounter. And then the most, I think, gorgeous and exciting thing is that foundation that you build from those new insights and perspectives, you see what some of your fellow graduate or fellow Langsters who've come before you have done. Then you don't just get to notice them, to analyze them, but you actually get to get out there and transform them. And that doesn't start the day you graduate, it literally starts today. So I am honored and excited to be here with you on this mission. I welcome you, and I cannot wait to meet all of you. Congratulations and welcome to Lang.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to speak from behind this podium instead of out there. My name is Scott Korb, and I direct the first-year writing program, and I'm also teaching in the seminar program that Natalia was just talking about. And I have just a few words that I'm going to share with you about what I think about the first-year writing program. And because I'm old school, I'm going to start with a quote. There are zillions of ideas out there. They stream by like neutrons. What makes someone pluck forth one thing, a thing you're going to be spending as much as 3 years with? If I went down a list of all the pieces I ever had in the New Yorker, upward of 90% would relate to things I did when I was a kid. Over the years teaching first-year writing, I've come back time and again to these words from the great factual writer, the great essay writer, John McPhee. For first-year students, these words can be a revelation, or so it seems when I present them in class. If McPhee's experience is any example, you will not someday, with a diplomacy, become a person with worthwhile interests or an intelligence to accept life's challenges. You are already that person now. If McPhee is right, I think in time, your interests will surely deepen and expand. You'll find so much new here at Lang, things you could never expect. But you will not be asked at some point to begin your lives as adults, to begin the work of your lives. This is the central lesson of my classes. You've already begun. Now tell me about it. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you believe and what you're coming to believe. Use the word I. I say this in part because McPhee's ideas remind me that the things of my youth, the things I was into that affected me when I was a kid, are useful and meaningful still today. Indeed, the first book I remember reading in college happens to be John McPhee's book, Oranges, a fascinating one about oranges and orange juice production, which I read with a writer named Jesse Lee Kercheval, who one day during a writing workshop plunked a huge stack of pages on the seminar table in front of us and said, "Here's my new book, it's done." I think we probably applauded. Jesse Lee's book was called Space, a memoir about her growing up in Florida during the international race to the moon. And when those pages hit the table, that's when I realized, I think, that I could write a book. That books were nothing more, and I suppose a lot more, than words all put in the right order and printed out on paper that looked just like the paper that I fed into my printer after my stories and essays were done, after I finished at 1 or 2 in the morning. Jesse Lee just had a lot more of those pages than I'd ever written. But she presented me evidence when I was 18 or 19 that it could be done, and that one could write a book about what it was like to grow up, to be a kid at a particular moment in American history, and that one's kidness, one's childhood was meaningful. That's what McPhee's saying too, of course. 90% of what he's written for the New Yorker magazine has had to do with things he's been interested in: basketball, fishing, rocks, rivers, tennis, to name a few, since he was a kid. And his book, Oranges, is one now I teach in my research methods class in the spring, a class about food writing I call Setting a Fine Table. Look for it. As a writer, I've taken Jesse Lee's and John McPhee's advice to heart. It's impossible, perhaps, to avoid. Spending more than 20 years reckoning with the joys and tragedies, the shame and grief, commitments to sport and study of my own pre-college years. A good deal of my writing continues to take me to northern Florida, where when I was young, my father was killed by a drunken driver. The stories I continue to uncover there about justice and race and addiction begin with me at 5 years old and continue through my adolescence into this adult life. This is the subject of my current book project, a novel set at a tourist motel in the same Florida town that's home to the Electric Chair, a motel my grandfather owned in the early 1960s called the Stark Motor Court. John McPhee tells me that there's no good reason for me ever to stop going to Florida and attending to what happened there. But his work and the work of so many others asks me to keep looking beyond what I know into the unfathomable. At the start of last semester, since it was cold, I read some passages from the writer Barry Lopez's wintry classic, Arctic Dreams. The descriptions of nature in that book are incomparable, even as the setting itself remains ineffable. The physical landscape, Lopez writes, is baffling in its ability to transcend whatever we would make of it. It is as subtle in its expression as turns of the mind, and larger than our grasp, and yet it is still knowable. Combined with the lesson from McPhee, this has been a major lesson for my students in recent years. Look around at what baffles you. Look in at your own particular and peculiar self and how your own frontiers continue to edge back. Don't worry, you'll never fully grasp how the world transcends you and your ability to describe it. I surely don't, and I'm 41. But don't forget, you've been trying to understand and triumph in the world for as long as you can remember, even as a kid. Now go and write. Over the past few years, I've also been reading the activist and poet and story writer Grace Paley, whose 1970 essay, Some Notes on Teaching, Probably Spoken, will assume a place like McPhee's essays in my writing classes over the next decade. They're often saying the same thing, I think. Consider where Paley says it's possible to write about anything in the world. McPhee counters with, there are zillions of ideas out there. And as a teacher, Paley, like McPhee, asked her students to take courage in what they already know, which for her means the sound of their own voices. There's probably a natural grammar at the tip of your tongue, Paley writes. You may not believe it, but if you say what's on your mind in the language that comes to you from your parents and your street and friends, you'll probably say something beautiful. A student in one of my writing classes recently wrote this sentence. Meals require some planning and preparation and are rarely eaten while standing up. I can't say exactly why that's beautiful, but it has something to do with the tension around the word and the hopeful ease of the first few words falling victim to the staccato rush to the end. It's a sentence that with insight works against its own interest, defining a thing by what it rarely is. Meals seem regretfully scarce in the life of this person, whom I imagine standing while eating most of the time, rushing out the door with a scrap of food, perhaps on her way to my 8 a.m. class. But wait, I can say why that sentence is beautiful, because its language sounds like the writer who wrote it. Grace Paley blames whatever bad essays I read, the writing that refuses to sound like the writer, on shame. But it's not the shame of our students who want to sound smarter than they feel or impress me with what they think I want to hear about this poem or that essay. About Ellen Bass's poem Failure, say, or Chang Rae Lee's essay Sea Urchin, both of which I'll teach this year, whose brilliance originates in the language of the writer's homes and streets. A father lay dying. A teenage daughter attempts to feed him, and Ellen Bass writes, so the gruel slid back out again, dribbling down his badly shaved chin, and he not doing anything to stop it. My father, I left him there. A 14-year-old Chang Rae Lee, in the thrall of his hormones, eats sea urchin for the first time and loses himself, confuses himself with the thing in his mouth, and Lee writes, I'm half gagging, still chewing. It's as if I had another tongue in my mouth, this blind, self-satisfied creature. It may be too obvious to say that the boldness of these lines, which each break the rules a little and also draw on the lies of these writers from before they went to college, is wrapped up in the shamelessness of their particular language. From my point of view, and with Paley in mind, these writers appear lucky and strong. And like her, and yes, me, perhaps they were convinced early on of their own specific talent with language. Not everyone is so fortunate. If you weren't a tough, recalcitrant kid, Paley says, that language may have been destroyed by the tongues of school teachers who were ashamed of interesting homes, inflection, and language and left them all for correct usage. It's not their own shame that holds young writers back. It's our shame. And I, for one, work every day with you to move beyond that. Grace Paley presents a challenge for the teacher of young writers, to decide that at some level, even we can encourage in all of you something more than correctness. We can expect in your work the abstract quality of beauty, sentences that are pleasing and satisfying to the mind for reasons that may remain inexplicable, that reveal sources of drama that arise or arose in the streets and friends and homes of our students, and not in our streets or among our friends or in our homes. That reveal something specific and shameless about your lives and minds, and say a thing we, your teachers, might never say, despite all we think we have to teach you. And it's these ideas that inspired the Grace Paley Teaching Fellowship, now in its second year. The winner, Shobha Rao, who is teaching one of your courses this term, embodies this commitment to shamelessness and the abstract quality of beauty. You'll hear from her in a moment. For now, I'll end knowing there are zillions of ideas out there among you, streaming by like neutrons. Reach out, grab one. It may be larger than your grasp, but it is knowable. You can write it, and again, as Grace Paley says, you may not believe it, but if you say what's on your mind in the language that comes to you from your parents and your street and your friends, you'll probably say something beautiful. Thank you.
Good morning. It's such a delight to be here with you. I am Shobha Rao. I'm the Grace Paley Teaching Fellow, as Scott said. Thank you. I would like to talk to you a little bit today about community, as many of us up here have been. But in doing so, I'd like to talk to you by speaking to its most necessary and its most elusive twin, solitude. Community and solitude may seem unrelated, maybe even anathema, but I consider them absolutely linked, maybe even the same. Let me explain. We are here today at the Eugene Lang College of Liberal Arts, you and I. And so I would venture to guess that we're deeply committed to the life of the mind, that we consider the imagination worthy of exploring, deepening, and destabilizing. And community certainly is a way to do all of those things. Friends, mentors, muses. We are in New York City, so there is no shortage of any of those. But there is something that there may be a shortage of, that we may need to fight for, and that is more important to the imagination than all the friends and mentors and muses in the world. And that is solitude. I would like to tell you a story. In 2014, I was contracted to write a novel. For any writer, it is a dream come true. But the only problem was I had no idea what to write about. None. I didn't have any characters, not a single one. I had zero ideas for a plot. I didn't even have a sense of a vague theme. Nothing. So I contacted my editor, and I told her my dilemma. She thought about it for a little bit, and she said, okay, why don't you write about this? Now, it doesn't matter what she told me, because it didn't work. In fact, it was miserable. I wrote the novel with the premise she suggested, an excruciating and grueling process. It was like pulling teeth. I turned it in, and she rejected it outright. She rejected it because it was a bad novel. It was awful. It had no heart. It had no heat. In other words, it didn't come from within, not in the least. By now, it's 2016, the clock is ticking, and 2 years have gone by. I am still in a pickle. I still have no ideas. It's as if all my creative juices have just dried up. And there I am, sitting in my apartment in San Francisco, day after day after day, staring at a blank screen. So now back to the solitude. Around this time, a friend of mine who is from South Dakota comes to me and says that his mom has recently bought a cabin outside the Badlands National Park. Because neither he nor his mom have time to go and stay there for any extended period of time, he says to me, "So, do you know anyone who might want to go out to the Badlands, maybe stay for a long weekend, a week?" I didn't have to think about it for long. Almost immediately, I said, "I do know someone who wants to go out there, but I would like to stay for 2 months." And just as quickly, this friend said, No. You can't do that. It's too isolated for a woman alone, for anyone alone, and certainly not for that long. But I was determined. You see, I had already done to death the community portion of creative life. I'd talked endlessly with friends, asked for advice, read books, gone to readings, sat in the company far more accomplished than I was. Now it was time for the quiet. It was time for the true voice. Quiet is within, certainly, but quiet is also without. Still, nothing in my life had prepared me for how profoundly quiet, how intensely isolated this cabin in South Dakota was. It was on open prairie, miles and miles of open prairie. The nearest town was 5 miles away, and it had a population of 47 people. Out there were no people, no cars, nothing. For days, there was hardly any sound on that prairie. In fact, it was so quiet, so silent, so devoid of sound or movement that a bird flying past my cabin would thrill me. And if it happened to chirp as it flew past, I would begin to weep. In addition to the silence, there's one other thing on that prairie, and that was storm. I would look to the west 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, and out of the black hills would rise these tremendous, intense thunderstorms. Lightning in every direction, thunder as if it was booming out of the earth. And because the cabin was not anchored to the ground and was just resting on a tractor-trailer bed, something my friend had not mentioned before I went out there, the 70 and 80 mile an hour winds would shake it like it was a snow globe in a child's hand. There was no escaping the power of these storms. Sometimes I would hide in the corner, crouching, with my hands over my ears. But as soon as the storm was over, the silence would return, and so that was all there was, silence and storm. The first few days in the Badlands, I was terrified, and I was horribly alone. I had never in my life known such silence nor such storms. And I thought at times during those first few days that I might go mad, toggling as I was between the fear of silence and the fear of those storms. But I didn't. I didn't go mad, not that I know of, because here is what I did have. I had solitude. There was no noise, no people, obviously, but I also had no television, no internet, no radio. I had nothing, in fact, but my imagination. And this led me to realize something else very quickly, and it was this. If I was to have any company out on that prairie, if I was to have any friends or mentors or muses, any whatsoever, I would have to write them. I would have to write them into existence. In fact, I had no other choice. 2 months later, I had the first draft which is very close to the final draft of my novel, Girls Burn Brighter. Now, what does this mean? What does any of this have to do with community, and how is this even relevant to you, to us, here today in the middle of New York City? Here's what I say. We are here to create. We are here to think. We are here to imagine. And nothing is as brave and as necessary for any of those things than solitude. To sit alone, to walk alone, to eat alone, to wander the halls of our mind alone. What we do in this aloneness is to deepen our sense of self, our sense of what is possible. We become, in this solitude, richer. So that when we do venture out of the solitude, when we do engage with friends and mentors and muses, what we bring to them is a more enriched self, a more self-realized self. And so we then participate in more meaningful community, a stronger community, and a community to which we have more to contribute and from which we have more to gain. Because community without solitude is just noise, and that is something we have an abundance of. So take long walks by yourself. Memorize a poem. Walk into a museum on a whim. Sit and stare out of a window. Weep at the flight and the call of a bird. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to do an experiment in getting to know each other. My name is Alan Strouse, and I'm an alum of Lang. I went here from 2004 to 2008, and now I'm a professor at Lang. I'm a poet and a scholar of medieval literature. So as I was preparing my remarks for today, I was thinking about how this is not a very typical Lang format with people talking at you. Actually, what will happen most of the time at Lang is we will be together in small seminars that really cherish individual creativity and intellectual independence and personality. So I was thinking it might help if I just told you personally about my first week at Lang back in 2004 and the memories that really stick out to me, and that now, 14 years later, I have some perspective on. So the first thing that I remember from that week, and I remember it's like seared into my mind, somebody was up on the stage talking and said, "Listen up." Oh my gosh, it was really startling. She said, "Listen up. You're going to have to work so hard. You are going to read so much and write so much. And if you don't want," she said this word for word, she said, "if you don't want to, NYU is taking applications." Oh my God. And I thought, okay, I want to go here. But I didn't until later really understand what she was talking about, because at the time I thought, oh, that just means we'll be reading a lot of cool books. No, it's even deeper than that. It means that on a day-to-day basis, you're going to be doing some really gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, mind-fucking, soul-saving work. The challenges will be really existential, making you question everything you know and making you think, like, what is knowledge? I don't even know what knowledge is. And when that happens, it will be really painful. But everyone here is aware of how that's going to happen and will be here to help you out and make sure that it's also a happy experience. The second thing I remember is my first class, going in and everyone introducing themselves, and the professor saying, "Well, I'll introduce myself." He was very shy and kind of self-effacing. He said, "Well, I love cooking, and I speak 6 languages, and I'm a professor of the Renaissance, and I'm a classical pianist." And then he kind of teared up a little bit, and he said, "Shakespeare is the love of my life." And I was just totally, I grew up in the country. Nobody there read Shakespeare or knew Shakespeare. And maybe you don't like Shakespeare, whatever. That's not the point. The point is, like, this person and all of the students and faculty here approach what they do with such high stakes, because learning is a flesh and blood experience that is as important as the love of your life, or the loves of your life, as it were. And then, I was just reminiscing the third thing about the folks that I met the first week. There was Lily, who became kind of the spiritual guru of our group. At the time, kind of obnoxious, but she has since gone on to become, she kind of wandered around after Lang and finally settled down. She's a master of Tibetan medicine and has a practice. And there was Lena Dunham, who is my on-again, off-again girlfriend, which I still don't know how to process. And there was this really sweet guy, Peter, and within the first week, he was giving me the books that he was reading in his classes and asking me to give him the books that I was reading in my classes. So we were reading like double the course load and talking all night, wandering around the village, talking about where does evil come from? Oh my goodness. And reading each other's papers very seriously, and creating all of us together this really rich exchange of ideas. So that was my experience, and yours is going to be so different because each of you will be so different, and this place is going to embrace that. So what we're going to do now to kind of get to know each other a little bit, let me just explain how this will work, if it will work, because we haven't tried it yet. We're going to, in pairs or in threes, speak with one another, get to know each other a little bit, and then using a smartphone, if you have one, we're going to write a little bit and send it to the social media wall, which will be projected up here. And so, honestly, I don't know. I don't have any social media. I have a flip phone. This is like an old bald dude trying to be cool. I hope that it's cool. So the assignment right now is to find someone you don't know or don't know very well, which should be easy, and to interview them and to find something that you have in common and to collaborate, to write a sentence together about what you have in common, and to post that sentence with a selfie of you to the social media wall. And the hashtag is Lang2022. I didn't quite hear, yes. Oh, that's a good question. That's in my notes. Twitter and or Instagram. And if you don't have that, like me, find somebody who does, and that'll be part of the learning to know someone else process.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Hey, that's good. I like that energy. Let's keep it up, y'all. So, good morning. My name is Raquel Samuel. I am a student success advisor for the Higher Education Opportunity Program. I also graduated from Lang in 2014. Alum. I am also a first-generation college student. So that means I'm the first in my family to complete a 4-year degree. So I'm here to talk to you about an initiative/program that is called New School First, and we work with first-generation college students here at the New School. And so does anyone identify with being the first? Just give a shout out. I think I've noticed I recognize some people at the orientation that happened on Tuesday, so shout out to y'all for showing up for that. So in the fall, we're going to have a list of events, and the title, we have a series that's happening called First 90 Series. And so the First 90 series, are you looking at the, it's a little distracting. We have a series called the First 90 Series, and so basically the premise of that is that within the first 90 days, we want to increase engagement amongst first-generation college students and really increase community amongst you all. And acknowledging that all first-generation college students have unique characteristics that make you really important to the new school community. So we're going to kick off the fall semester next week with a welcome back barbecue that's happening from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. in the Lang Courtyard. And then the first event that's happening is on September 6th, I believe, and that's a film screening of a first-generation college film, just talking about the first-gen experience. So if you're interested in learning more and being a part of this community, you can email the New School First Committee at nsfirst, that's FIRTS, at newschool.edu. Thank you.
Hi, y'all. I'm Maeve. I am a third-year literary studies major, and it is my second year as a first-year fellow. I am the fellow for the seminar Bio, Art, and Social Justice.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a second-year psych major, and it's my first year as a fellow, and I'll be working with the Young Lives class.
As you hopefully know by now, your first-year seminar is taught by the professor who also serves as your faculty advisor during your first year at Lang. But what you might not know is that you have a first-year fellow who co-leads that class.
We're experienced students that are here to offer extra support as you transition into college life. We'll be leading special workshops with you for the next 6 weeks in your first seminar classes that are specifically designed to help you develop critical thinking skills, about social justice and liberal arts, as well as good study habits, academic planning and time management, seminar discussion techniques, personal health and safety awareness.
Here are the instructions for the rest of your day. Transfer students and BA, BFA students not enrolled in a first-year seminar can explore the campus until the Meet the Faculty event that's in the Lang Cafe at 2 p.m. And the students enrolled in the first-year seminar will be heading to your first-year seminar classrooms.
We have a list of all the classrooms on your orientation sheet, and also take note, you guys also have the locations for your academic advisor breakouts for tomorrow. If you missed grabbing a sheet, don't worry. Or you don't know where you're going because, duh. You can find one of our volunteers outside of the auditorium. Thank you, and we can't wait to meet you all. And then please exit towards the exit sign to your left or right.
The left door.
Left door.
That side.
That over there.
Because students are coming in here.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
See you guys later.